Welcome, brave souls, to the fire's flickering light, where shadows dance and whispers of the unknown drift on the wind. I'm Sam Hain, your guide through the eerie tales that haunt the darkest corners of your imagination. Tonight, we gather around the flames to uncover stories that will chill your bones, make your heart race, and keep you looking over your shoulder. From ancient legends to ghastly encounters, these tales are not for the faint of heart. So, stoke the fire, lean in close, and prepare yourself for a journey into the realm of the strange and the sinister. Are you ready to be afraid? Let the storytelling begin.
Welcome back, brave souls, to another night of chilling tales. Tonight, we venture into the heart of the forest on Halloween night, where four friends are about to discover that some legends are more than just campfire stories. As shadows creep and footsteps echo in the dark, they'll learn that fear isn't always just in our minds. So settle in, keep your flashlight close, and listen carefully, because once this story begins, there's no turning back. This is The Midnight Hunt. Four teenage friends, James, William, Lewis and Mason, decided to spend Halloween night camping deep in the woods. The air was crisp, the moon hung low in the sky, and dead leaves crunched under their boots as they made their way to a clearing miles from town. It was the perfect night for sharing scary stories around a fire. As darkness settled, the flickering flames of their campfire cast eerie shadows on the surrounding trees. The boys sat on logs, each taking turns trying to outdo the last with tales of ghosts, demons and monsters. James was in the middle of his story, a classic about a haunted house, when Lewis interrupted. "Shh, did you hear that?" Lewis said, looking into the forest. "Quit messing around, Lou," William scoffed, tossing a stick into the fire. "You're no scaring anyone." "No, seriously," Lewis insisted, standing up. "It sounded like footsteps over there." The group went quiet, their eyes scanning the tree line, but all they heard was the crackling fire and the rustling leaves in the breeze. After a few moments, Mason laughed. "Relax. This place is full of animals." James struggled and continued his story, but the mood had shifted. Every creak, every rustle in the underbrush seemed louder now. They felt exposed, like something unseen was watching them from the darkness. An hour later, just as the fire was beginning to die, the footsteps returned, louder this time. The boys froze, looking at one another with wide eyes. "I heard it that time," Williams whispered. "Okay, who's messing with us?" James asked, standing up. His voice was tense, though he tried to sound brave. "Someone's out there. Show yourself." Silence. Then, the crack of a branch snapping just beyond the clearing. "Okay, that's not funny," Mason muttered. He pulled a flashlight from his bag and pointed it into the trees. The beam sliced through the darkness, revealing only thick trunks and narrow branches. "Let's go check it out," James said, grabbing his own flashlight. Lewis shook his head. "What? Are you crazy? We should stay by the fire." But James was already stepping away from the circle of warmth and light. William followed close behind, with Mason reluctantly bringing up the rear. Lewis stayed by the fire, watching nervously as his friends disappeared into the woods. James led the way, sweeping his light from side to side. They walked a few yards from camp when William stopped suddenly. "Look," he whispered, pointing to the ground. There, half buried in leaves, were large footprints, too large to belong to any of them. The prints were deep, suggesting whoever or whatever had made them was heavy. They followed the tracks with their flashlights, but after a few yards, they simply stopped. "That's weird," Mason said, his voice shaky. "They just end." "Maybe it's an animal," James suggested, though he didn't sound convinced. William shook his head. "No animal makes prints like that." A sudden snap echoed through the trees, closer than before. The boys jumped, their flashlights darting in every direction. Lewis's voice called out from the camp, "Guys, get back here!" Without another word, they turned and ran back to the fire. Lewis was standing, looking pale, his eyes wide with fear. There was someone," he said breathlessly. "I saw something or someone over there." He pointed to the opposite side of the clearing from where they had just been. The air felt colder now, and a thick fog was beginning to roll in, obscuring the trees. The boys huddled together by the fire, which now felt far too small to keep the darkness at bay. "What do we do?" Mason asked, his voice trembling. "We need to leave," William said. "Now." James shook his head. "We don't even know what it is. It could just be someone trying to scare us." But deep down, none of them believed that. There was something wrong here, something that didn't belong. Suddenly a loud rustling sound came from the trees, followed by the distinct sound of breathing. Slow, heavy and deliberate. It was close. Too close. "We're leaving, now," Lewis said, his voice barely more than a whisper. They grabbed their gear in a frenzy, shoving things into their bags as fast as they could. The firelight flickered, casting long, twisted shadows across the clearing. The breathing grew louder, now circling them from the trees. "Go!" William shouted, and they took off running down the trail that led back to the road. Branches whipped at their faces and the fog thickened, making it hard to see. But they didn't dare slow down. They couldn't. Behind them, they could hear footsteps, heavy, deliberate footsteps that seemed to match their pace. "Don't look back," James yelled, but Mason couldn't help himself. He glanced over his shoulder and saw a tall, dark figure moving through the fog, just beyond the reach of their flashlights. "Faster," he screamed, pushing his legs to move as fast as they could. The road was just ahead. He could see it through the trees. His lungs burned and his heart pounded in his ears. But they couldn't stop. The footsteps were getting closer. As they burst through the tree line and onto the road, the footsteps stopped. They skidded to a halt, panting and gasping for breath. Turning to see if the figure had followed them out of the woods, there was nothing. Only silence and thick, creeping fog that swallowed the trees behind them. "Is it gone?" William asked between ragged breaths. "I don't know," James said, his voice shaky. The boys didn't wait. They jogged down the road, not stopping until they reached the safety of their village. They never spoke about what happened in those woods again, and none of them ever returned to that campsite. Every Halloween, they made sure to stay far away from the forest, because they knew something was still out there. Something that would hunt again. Thanks for joining us tonight under the midnight sky, where shadows and whispers blurred the line between safety and fear. If you enjoyed the Midnight Hunt, make sure to like, subscribe and hit that notification bell, so you're always first to hear what lurks in the darkness. Remember, sometimes the scariest stories aren't the ones we tell around the campfire, but the ones that follow us home. Until next time, keep the lights on, and maybe stay out of the woods this Halloween.